Good morning. Well, this is a little awkward. Seems I'm the only one that's turned up in a suit with a 3.5-hour speech, just to perpetuate every single stereotype you already have about the United Nations. Also great to follow Sherilyn, the world's toughest act, but here we are. So I've had the honor of speaking right around the world in front of CEOs, royalty, world leaders, but this is the first time I've ever delivered a speech in front of my 3 children. And for whatever reason, that makes me more nervous than anything. Also, thanks Sherilyn and Maz for teaching my kids some really colourful new words. So I'm David, and I'm the Chief Communication Marketing Officer at the United Nations Foundation based in Washington, DC. So the UN turns 80 this year, and it's achieved a hell of a lot in that time. From vaccinating almost half the world's children, to protecting 139 million people who are fleeing war, persecution and conflict and famine, to feeding over 123 million people in 120 countries. Now these are really big stats, but behind each one of these numbers is a real child, woman or man. To 61,000 peacekeepers working every day in 11 active duty stations. All the way to a bunch of things much closer to home, like regulating the flight paths to help us get here, and also the satellites which enable our mobile phones. And yet some of the UN's greatest achievements are the things that we'll never see. From the conflicts that were prevented due to diplomacy, to potential pandemics which were caught early due to global cooperation. Someone asked me yesterday what it was like working at the UN. And honestly, off script, I thought about it and said, you know what? To me, it's a place that represents hope. UN headquarters in New York is an incredible campus. It's the only place you'll see a Ukrainian and a Russian sharing a drink, a Palestinian and an Israeli sharing a meal, even Australians and New Zealanders getting along. And yet headquarters is only a tiny part of the UN. It's ordinary people in extraordinary situations doing whatever they can to do to help others. And that sense of humanity, people helping people, seems to be a little lost right now. And I truly believe that it's this world, storytellers, that can help us get things back on track. So the foundation I work for, set up to help the UN and UN causes, started by this guy, Ted Turner, handsome fella, who famously once said, "The world is facing many obstacles, but I've never found much use in giving up. It's much more effective just to get to work." So I'm here today in arguably one of the craziest and most troubling periods in the history of the world in which I work, and certainly the UN. But equally, it's a moment that presents an opportunity to try new things, to take some risks, to mobilize the good forces and try new and impactful ways to get things back on track. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Big, bold, crazy ideas and why they're needed now more than ever. So I've spent the better part of my career, one that I feel truly grateful to have, bringing together the best and brightest of the creative community with the UN to try to help solve some of the world's greatest challenges. 5 years heading film and special projects with a part of the UN that deals with emergencies and disasters, 6 years as Global Chief of Brand Building for UNICEF, and 4 years running around the world as the filmmaker of the then Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. My work at the UN has got me to some incredible places and working with some amazing people and teams. Here are some snaps that really just make your mother proud. In the same year, I went to the North Pole and North Korea, two norths I never thought I'd get to. That smiling boy up in the top right, he's in Pyongyang, and just below that was filming in the polar ice rim. I got to collaborate with some of the most incredible people whose music I unashamedly listened to, whose films I've watched, folks I even saw documentaries about. As Maz mentioned, in 2013 with David Guetta, we evacuated about half UN headquarters to project a brand new music video on the front of the building to raise money for humanitarian causes, which seemed like a good idea at the time. Then along with Hugh Jackman in 2015, with permission of Yoko Ono, we remade John Lennon's iconic Imagine with 150 artists around the world. We remixed Pink's What About Us with kids from right around the planet, convinced Messi to play football blindfolded, got stuck in the ice for 24 hours in the polar ice rim, made the #1 TED Talk in the world with, that's Molly Wright, right there in the middle, 7-year-old Molly Wright from right here in Queensland. Was there the first night of the Haiti earthquake, literally watching the best and worst of humanity side by side. Was in Egypt during the beginning of the Arab Spring. I think it was my daughter yawning. Got briefly detained in North Korea and Libya, had a very memorable moment with a friendly terrorist organization in Niger, and became the Secretary General's filmmaker, largely by getting off on the wrong floor at UN headquarters. All in all, probably averaging about one pinch yourself moment per week for the last 15 years. So how did it all start? For the hatchlings in the audience, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story. So I went to university in Bathurst. Are there any Mitchell Mafia here? No, they're still at the Pinterest welcome party. I'm not particularly great at geography, which is ironic, seeing I work at the UN, but Bathurst is somewhere around there. So I was studying communications and advertising. For our final year project, we had to pick a client and do a campaign for them. And I remember a lot of my friends went down and signed up local businesses. But for whatever reason, I narrowed it down to either Nike or the United Nations. Now, one evening, almost on a whim, I call up UN headquarters and manage to talk my way through to someone in the communications team with the worst pitch. It was something like, "Hi, I'm David, I'm calling from Australia, and I would like to offer my services pro bono to the United Nations." I mean, she gave me a better reaction than my daughter anyway. And she was a bit, well, firstly, I was amazed I managed to get through, and then she was a bit cranky, and she said, "Well, you're calling a bit late, aren't you?" And I sort of freaked out thinking I'd messed up the time difference. And she said, "You are calling about the World AIDS Day campaign, yes?" To which I said, "Yes." Turns out that just a few weeks earlier, the UN had put out a global tender to advertising agencies right around the world. So they sent us a bunch of paperwork, which of course I couldn't fill out. It was my company's financials for the last 5 years. I remember being on the call seeing my flatmate who was kind of passed out in the corner. And instead, we just did the only thing that we thought we knew how to do. You know, we were studying advertising in the day, so at nighttime, we got a bunch of friends together and we just went ahead and made a campaign. The call was on Tuesday and the deadline was that Friday. And we drove to Sydney armed with a VHS cassette. Hatchlings, feel free to ask the person next to you what that is. And borrowed suits. I remember mine was just a little bit too long. And I remember getting out of the lift and there was a very fancy advertising agency that got in with all their clipboards and their things. We were just a bunch of university students. They didn't take us particularly seriously at first, but thankfully they let us present. I remember we pitched our little hearts out and got back in the car and drove back to Bathurst thinking, what an incredible experience, and now get back on with real life. 2 weeks later, something entirely unexpected happened, and I think we were the most surprised. We won the global tender. Knocking out a bunch of actual advertising agencies. And soon our campaign was running right around the world, in stadiums, in cinemas. A campaign produced by a couple of students in regional New South Wales had gone global. It was a real aha moment for me and the beginning of my unhealthy love of the United Nations. Then a week after university finished, something even more unexpected happened. This time, the UN called me. A job had come up in East Timor. The whole communications team, in the space of 2 days, had gotten sick with dengue and malaria, and they desperately needed someone to go in and run the comms team. Some bright spark in New York said, well, what about that kid in Sydney that just did World AIDS Day? Let's send him. Probably because I was close and cheap. And woefully behind on my slides. What followed was the most incredible experience. My boss was this really charismatic Brazilian diplomat called Sergio Vieira de Mello. My eyes were open and my mind was blown. It was while I was in East Timor that I was offered the job at Saatchi & Saatchi, the advertising agency that I'd always wanted to work for. But I remember receiving that call, and I was driving in a UN Jeep through a town where smoke was still billowing from the remains of charred homes. And I could already feel my priorities and purpose were starting to shift. In Timor-Leste, in difficult circumstances, we're working to move families from a bunch of areas where there was dengue and militia. And I finished my contract with the UN on a Tuesday, and I started with Saatchi's on a Wednesday. And I remember sitting in this really plush boardroom, having a lengthy conversation about whether a Toyota logo should come in a few frames earlier or later in a TV spot. And honestly, that's nothing against Toyota or Saatchi's or advertising. In fact, the exact opposite. It was just that the 20-year-old version of myself was sitting there thinking, if only we had 10% of the creativity, the strategy, the partnerships that I had in this room, if we had that yesterday in Dili, maybe we could have solved a lot more issues and maybe even saved some lives. And that insight has pretty much driven everything I've done since. So a decade in advertising, marketing, and production finished in 2008 when I joined the United Nations. Now, the UN has a bunch of international days. Most of them go by completely unnoticed. A couple, like International Women's Day, has captured public imagination. So I was given the task of trying to make one of these international days famous. August 19, World Humanitarian Day, had particular personal significance for me as it was the anniversary of the death of my boss in East Timor, Sergio Vieira de Mello, who was killed in Baghdad when a suicide bomber blew up UN headquarters. That's the flag that was hanging above the UN, and in the white shirt, that's Sergio. As a grim aside, almost every year since that day, over 200 aid workers are either killed or kidnapped in the line of duty, up to over 500 last year. So an incredibly difficult environment in which to operate. So World Humanitarian Day, a day to celebrate these aid workers and to shine a spotlight on the most pressing humanitarian challenges. To make a day famous, you first have to get it known. You have to get it on the calendar. So we set out the task of trying to reach 1 billion people on one day with one simple message. Do something good somewhere for someone else in honor of aid workers like Sergio. To do that, we needed an iconic piece of content, an innovative way of getting it to the world, and it would certainly help to have one of the world's biggest voices on board. We got together with some incredible creative talent, David Droga, Ridley Scott and Associates, and here's the result.
meant something that I left behind. When I leave this world, I'll leave no regrets. Leave something to remember so they won't forget. I was here, I lived, I loved, I was here, I've done everything that I wanted, and it was more than I thought it would be. I will leave my mark so everyone will know I was here.
The shoot itself was incredibly emotional. We shot it in front of a live audience and filled with families who had lost, had family members who had either been killed or kidnapped in the line of duty. Sergio's son was sitting in the front row. Just as a little production aside, we were going to shoot it 3 times to get it, Beyonce perfect. And when we told her who was in the audience and when she saw Sergio's son, you could see the emotion. And so that was one take. And that video has now been seen 180 million times. Lots of really lovely anecdotes that started flowing in from around the world, like a woman in a supermarket in Chicago who literally turned and announced that she was going to buy the groceries for everyone in the row behind her because she said, heck, I saw the video, it's World Humanitarian Day, and it's about time I do something good for someone else. Here's a quick look at some of the other parts of the campaign.
World Humanitarian Day falls on August 19th. It exists to commemorate aid workers and promote humanitarian acts.
There are such big humanitarian emergencies around the world that people very often feel, what can I do? The little actions that we take to help people around the world, they all make a contribution.
But in a world that already has more causes than there are days in the calendar, how do you make people stop and listen to yours?
We started by sending the simplest of messages from one of the world's most important voices.
For World Humanitarian Day, we want people all over the world to do something good, somewhere for someone else. We want you to make your mark and say, I was here.
Next, we asked one of the world's most beautiful voices to give us a song. And partnering with RSA, we created 2 world firsts, a 7,000-pound screen and a music video shot in the United Nations General Assembly Hall.
I was here, I lived, I loved, I was here, I did, I've done.
But to make an impact in a world of 7 billion people, we figured we had to reach at least 1 billion on one day with one message. So we developed a new social amplification platform, Thunderclap, able to harness the collected energy of millions of supporters and release it as one voice, in one massive lightning bulb moment across the world, making it impossible to ignore. And before long, the message started to gain support. Influencers in politics, business, sports and entertainment began to get on board. Some of the world's greatest rivals even joined forces, and the numbers on our site started to add up. Finally, on the morning of August 19th, the message was released. I was here, was everywhere.
Today is World Humanitarian Day, which of course honors aid workers.
Beyonce is leading an effort to inspire people to make a difference.
People around the world are asked to celebrate the day by helping others and volunteering at local charities. Justin Bieber, Lady Gaga, and Michelle Obama are among those joining Beyonce in the cause.
The campaign was the subject of thousands of stories. It topped the global viral video chart. The message trended in 17 countries, and humanitarian events were held from New York to Dubai. By the end of the day, more than 1 billion people had been connected to something that 24 hours before, most of us had never heard of.
But people weren't just talking. At the I Was Here website, they were connecting with established humanitarian organizations and documenting thousands of their own kind acts for humanity.
So it was a memorable way to launch the day, and we broke a bunch of social media records. But in the end, we decided that the next time we got together to collaborate, we had to be able to measure it in something far more beyond just social media reach, from words to action. Unexpectedly, like most of my stories, that opportunity came in 2017. Beyonce was at home watching television. There was a segment about a small country in East Africa called Burundi, where less than half the population has access to clean, safe water, which, is insane. There was a really moving interview with a pregnant woman who told a heart-wrenching story that she knew she had to drink to survive, but she knew that the water, which wasn't clean, was harming her unborn child. Beyonce, who was pregnant herself at the time, asked the simple question: what could she do to help? So partnering with Beyonce's team and UNICEF, Be Good for Burundi was born, which has now led to over 80 wells and boreholes, providing clean, safe water to over 200,000 people in Burundi. So what hopefully started as an audacious music video in New York has made its way to the other side of the world in one of the world's poorest nations, bringing clean, safe water to children, women, and families. Way more important than social reach. So a couple more. This is a personal one. So when our first child, Harry, was born in a hospital on the Upper East Side, the day he was born, the doctors and midwives came in and said, "Have you seen the video?" No, we didn't know what they're talking about. They even brought in a form that we had to sign to say that we had seen the video before they would give us our child back and we could leave the hospital. So finally, they wheel in a television and play this really important public service announcement, which was basically, the message was, don't shake your baby. Now, it was a really important message, but I remember two things. One, I remember that video so well because it was in the kind of cocoon of love and safety in a hospital. You're surrounded by smart people who are well slept and machines that are beeping. And it's also just before, if there's any other new parents in the house, that fog of new parenting sets in. The second thing is I remember as we were crossing Central Park and every time we hit a bump, I was worried it was harming Harry. If only there was a message that I could have seen on that very first day that showed me a couple of simple, fun things you could do that could make a positive impact on your child. So that was the fateful day. And that's our boy, Harry. He's the one on the right. So in 2021, at the Minderoo Foundation, I had the honor of getting the brief of trying to make those first 5 years and the brain development that happens in a child even more famous. I came up with the crazy idea of trying to make the world's youngest ever TED Talk. The original script I wrote had the TED Talk delivered by a baby. Turns out that looks really creepy. So then we went on a hunt to try to find a 5-year-old to deliver the TED Talk, Thrive by 5. Turns out finding a 5-year-old to deliver a TED Talk, also not easy. So we did a nationwide casting and we came across the incredible 7-year-old Molly Wright, who's from right here in Queensland. We enrolled Michael Gracie, the director of Greatest Showman, some other incredible creative talent, M&C, Finch, and we filmed at the Sydney Opera House. Here's what happened.
We've realised that unless you start at the beginning, everything else we do is Band-Aid.
This is the most important issue. Get it right for the first 5 years. It sets up a child for the whole of their life course.
What if I was to tell you that a game of peekaboo could change the world?
Wait till you guys see this. 7-year-old Molly Wright.
Molly Wright, the Gold Coast girl who today made millions around the world sit up and listen.
I think actually the youngest TED Talk speaker ever. This was a big, bold, crazy idea.
So what's something you can do? Scientists call it serve and return. That's just a grown-up way of saying connect, talk, and play with us. And here's the really big news.
Thrive by 5, and it's got me all emotional. You have to watch it. Molly Wright.
Let's talk more about our brains. It can create up to 1 million neural connections every second. Imagine the difference we could make if everyone everywhere did this.
State government says it's committed to working with Minderoo to roll out the video's key messages across our health system.
The video is already being played in maternity wards as far away as Afghanistan.
Helping parents understand that everything that happens in those first few years is incredibly important.
Naming games like peekaboo actually build memory and trust.
I was looking for the auto cue and she didn't have one.
She doesn't even fidget.
I love it. I just love it. I can't say it enough.
It's so much more than just a game. It's our future. Take it from me, the 7-year-old up here, talking about brain science. See? Peekaboo really can change the world.
As a little production aside, so the day of the shoot, we're sitting there and Michael and I are in the kind of front row and we're really worried this is going to be such a long day for the studio audience. Line by line takes. Molly walks out in her little overalls and she literally delivers the entire TED Talk perfectly in one go. We are looking around us trying to figure out where the crew has hidden all the teleprompters. There wasn't any. Absolutely remarkable. I sent her the script the day before. It was version 47. We'd sent her version 45. She knew both, and she even picked lines she wanted from all of them. Absolutely incredible. The talk has now been viewed over 100 million times, and the thing we were most proud of is that stat at the end that says 9 out of 10 parents who saw the talk say they would connect, talk, and play more early and often with their children. It's now playing at maternity wards, including right here in Australia. Hopefully, impact at scale. So last year, I embarked on a new chapter as the Chief Communication Marketing Officer at the United Nations Foundation. As a team, we're really trying to do new things. Here's a final bonus idea. In an attempt to get young people around the world to tune into the UN's Summit of the Future, we recorded a live 30-minute broadcast, not from within the hallowed halls of the UN, but from across the street at Labi's halal food truck. Great falafel, by the way. This is some footage off my phone on our first take of the first day in front of a bunch of very confused UN staff. We employed a new AI-driven promotion distribution tool, and by doing so, we're able to reach 155 million people who saw the content 230 million times. Here's what happens next.
The United Nations, serious problems, serious meetings, and seriously long speeches. But in 2024, world saving was not business as usual. Ahead of a pivotal global moment,
welcome to the Summit of the Future.
The UN faced a crisis they didn't see coming. Gen Z weren't tuning in. Diplomatic speeches weren't cutting it in a world powered by 15-second sound bites. So, to meet the next generation on their feeds in their language, Once Upon a Future entered the chat, a broadcast event that didn't speak diplomat. In partnership with the internet's smartest, most chaotic, and most loved creators, we turned a 2-day UN summit into 30 minutes of unhinged, bite-sized brilliance. Checks out.
If you look at this map,
You might be an undervalued woman living on planet Earth.
the reality might look grim right now, but we are not stuck here.
All streaming live, not from the iconic assembly hall, but the food cart across the street. Topics like climate change, gender equality, and outer space regulation became simplified. Complexity found clarity. Serious became self-aware. And the UN found a new way to embrace the gravity of its issues through humor, hot takes, and getting lost in the sauce.
We just measure the vibes. We don't create them.
Short-circuiting the time needed for millions to get informed. We need to be valued right now. In just weeks, the UN transformed from speaking a language of the past,
Okay, boomer,
to the ultimate main character in Gen Z's algorithm.
Really? Prove it.
Garnering 228 million video views, 3.3 million social impressions, and $185 million in earned media. But the real win? Our efforts helped get the Pact for the Future signed at the summit, ensuring it wasn't just a document for world leaders, but a game plan the world can act on. All by answering the most important question about our future. What if we get it right?
To me, it's all about trying to tell important stories in new and engaging ways. Big, bold, crazy ideas, or positive mischief, as I like to call it. I think the most exciting place to work is in the nexus between creativity and cause. So how can you get involved? You certainly don't have to quit your job and go and live in a camp or a desert somewhere to help. Do what you're good at. Do what you love doing, and then find a way to make positive impact through that. Whether your passion is music or marketing or photography or whatever it is, there's a way you can use it for good in big or small ways. I heard backstage actually that Sparrow has agreed to donate the $1.48 already made on his OnlyFans page to a good cause. Respect. Make stuff you'd want to see or consume or do yourself. Come up with ideas that are sustainable, not one-off. Trust your instinct and your voice and have some fun in the process. Now, for the hatchlings, now I'm a dad, I can dish out dad advice. Keep learning about the issues. Consume content on both sides of the story. When I wake up in America, I watch a little bit of CNN, then turn to Fox, then local news, just so I can get different perspectives, even if you don't agree with them. Speak up about the issues you care about, and good old-fashioned persistence. I mean, I love how Ariane just casually dropped yesterday that to win the gold, she swims 15 kilometers a day. So completely inspiring. There was a guy at an event that I was speaking at in DC who said, be shameless, but not rude. And I kind of like that. Now, the part of the story I didn't tell you earlier is to finally land my dream UN job, I applied 27 times over 9 years. I remember telling friends and family if it got to 10 years or 30 applications, I'd give up on my UN dream. And on the 28th, they're like, great, when can you start? And for the brands out there, and there's some incredible ones here today, Pinterest, Microsoft, LinkedIn, as I'm sure you know, social responsibility doesn't just get you through the pearly gates quicker. It's actually good for business. There's that stat that of the S&P 500 companies who are investing in social impact, they're outperforming those that don't by 26%. Some of the coolest and most profitable brands are also the ones doing good. Corporations are more resourced than governments and the not-for-profit sector, hence an even greater ability to affect change. The rough ratio in America is about 20 trillion for corporates, 3 trillion for governments, and 1 trillion for not-for-profits. So you brands have the lion's share of power. And looking to the future, you would have seen that 2/3 of the generation coming through will only accept a job if the company has good CSR credentials. So my advice, spend less money making ads, especially the ones that say you care. Spend that money on helping to solve social issues, and then tell that story. So what's next? This year, we're embarking on our biggest campaign ever to hopefully make the world fall back in love with the idea of helping others, and to also raise some catalytic funds in the process, which is so desperately needed right now. And we need your help. It's time to take one giant creative swing to try to help get things back on track. And I'd love to connect with folks here for those who'd be interested to take part. The solutions to the greatest challenges we face are unlikely to come from the UN or NGOs or governments, and certainly not from them alone. They will come from the private sector, the creative community, storytellers, artists, from people like you, or heck, maybe even you. People who have access to resources, who follow their passions, who love, work, and care unreasonable amounts, who put up their hand, who pick up the phone, and who show up. Sure, the world's not in great shape, but I'm an optimist, and I believe that big, bold, crazy ideas can help make the difference. Because the greatest risk we could take right now is not taking any. So you know what? I'm going to take a risk right now, and I'm going to invite my children up onto the stage. So guys, how do you think it's going?
Well, Dad, I think it's going really well. Not too sure about that Elmo joke. I'm looking into the audience now, and I can see some really smart faces. And I'm just wondering if anyone out there has a big, bold, crazy idea, especially one that could help others. Why keep it to yourself when you can share it with the world? And Dad, can you please quit the dad jokes? Yeah, I think it's going really well. I love the crowd, but where are the crocodiles? You told me there were going to be actual crocodiles. I have so much big, bold, crazy ideas, and I'm only 7. Here's one of them. Imagine together what you guys could be doing.
Yeah. Well done, Messi. Yes, Charlotte?
Hello, my name is Charlotte. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. I was very touched last night to wish me luck for today. My kids bought me, I'm not sure if you can see these, Croc socks. It's kind of like a reverse mullet. It's bureaucrat up top, party down below. So to finish, I'm going to go back to my first story. I sometimes think about that first call I made to the UN. Without that, I'm pretty sure I'd never been involved in any of the projects I told you about today, or met my wife, who also works at UNICEF, or had the pleasure of coming and being with you here today. If you're to take one thing away from this morning's session, I hope it's what Harry said. Never leave an idea you have unrealized, especially one that could help others, because they, and you, my friends, are needed now more than ever. A big thank you to Pippa, Sparrow, and the organisers for inviting me. Thank you so much, guys. You've been a brilliant audience, and we have so much to fight for. Thank you.